Hey, well, let's get started. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for being here today. I know, we all know that next year is not going to be a normal school year, that it's going to be different, and we're going to have to be flexible as we work through what our instructional plans are going to look like. So again, I really appreciate you being here today to help us formulate those plans. Our goals today are really to share out where we are with the planning process for next year, give you a broad overview of the guidance we've been using to make this draft plan, and also to review some of the details in some of the specific areas such as instruction, facilities and transportation, and student support services. So if we could move to, I guess we can skip that slide, Teresa, and move to the next one. So just to kind of give you an overview of what our guiding principles have been as we've started to develop this plan. First and foremost, we want to ensure the health and safety of our students and staff. So that's been our number one priority. Number two, we know the importance of having in-person instruction. As everybody knows from what happened last quarter, we did the best we could, quickly transitioning to an online structure, but we know that's not ideal. So we want to try to give every student that wants to come to school the opportunity to come to school every day in green and yellow. And then the last thing we really want to do, because we know our families have different levels of comfort bringing their students back to school, is to provide options for our families. So if we could go to the next slide. As part of this, before we broke for the summer, we did send out a survey to all our families, and we asked them to complete that, just addressing different areas of instruction and their comfort with returning to school next year. As of today, we have about 2,000 families that have responded, so that's about 20% of our population, which I think is really good. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that there's a broad range of comfort level with returning to school in the fall. If you look at the far right, you can see that 28% or 550 of those respondents are very comfortable coming to school. The bookend to that is the far left. We have 18% that are very uncomfortable sending their students to school next year. So as we looked at these surveys, again, we wanted to make sure as we developed our plans and did the best we could next year to provide our families options, so they are able to develop, or at least to select a plan that they're most comfortable with for their students. And you see on this slide, again, it shows that we do have a mix of opinions. 46% really want to have full on-campus instruction. 21% are comfortable with fully online. And we have 32% that are comfortable with a hybrid option. So just shifting to the guidance, before we get into where we are as of today, I think one of the biggest challenges and frustrations that we faced over the last couple of months is the guidance, or really the lack of guidance that has been coming from the state. It's frequently changing. In fact, yesterday, we just received updated guidance on masks based on Dr. Levin's mandate last week that masks be worn in public. So prior to yesterday, the Department of Education was telling us that there was different options we should consider as far as having students and staff wear masks, but the decision was ultimately up to us. With the guidance that came out yesterday, we're going to have to require our students and staffs to wear masks in most instances. The other one really is that most of the guidance is general. So instead of giving us clear and specific requirements, the guidance has been general and giving us options to consider, and basically putting the decision-making back on the school district. And then the other thing that has been really frustrating for all of us, I think, is that some of the guidance that's been coming out from the different organizations has been very conflicting. So, and just to give you an example, when the PA Department of Revenue issued their overall guidance for us as far as developing a health and safety plan, which we're required to do before the start of school this year, And just touching on the three big bucket areas: masks, physical distancing, and transportation. You can see, as I mentioned before, masks now, we finally, yesterday, have some very specific guidance on what we must do with our students and staff. And you can see that there's very few exceptions to wearing a mask while at school at this point. So again, at least we have some specific guidance in that area. As far as the physical distancing and the transportation, the guidance again has been more advisory or asking us to consider things. If you look at the physical distancing in yellow, the plan says must include protocols that allow for 6 feet of separation among students and staff, but they put the caveat in there to the maximum extent possible, so they're not requiring 6 feet even in yellow, although they're strongly encouraging it. And then in green, the plan may include protocols that allow for 6 feet, and they say when appropriate. The same thing with transportation. They're just saying that we should consider social distancing under yellow and may consider it under green. So with that, we've had to look at other guidance from different organizations to try to help us guide our plans for the coming school year. And this is really an example of some of the conflicting guidance that we're seeing here. As far as physical distancing, the CDC recommends 6 feet when feasible. The World Health Organization, based on some research they did, feel that 3 feet is appropriate because a 3-foot distance reduces the transmission of the virus by 80%. Mathematica, a report that was funded by PDE, actually kind of conflicts the previous guidance and says that we may wish to investigate whether 3 or 6 feet is feasible. Bucks County Department of Health, I think it's the only Department of Health in the entire state, actually came out with some very clear and specific guidance for its school districts, and they're recommending a 3-foot minimum. As an aside, we did reach out to our Department of Health and see if they would be willing to issue a similar document, and they were not comfortable doing that. And then the last one, and one that we've kind of settled on as a common sense approach, is the American Academy of Pediatrics. They're saying that the distancing should be somewhere between 3 to 6 feet for students, recognizing that that they may transmit this disease, but the symptoms aren't as great for young people, and recommending 6 feet as much as possible for staff. And then for the transportation, the same thing. You can see CDC gives some general guidance on creating distancing when possible and provides an example of 1 student per row skipping rows. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like, on a 72 passenger bus, that means we would only be able to transport about 12 to 14 students on a bus. The National Center for School Facilities came out with some guidance, and they were recommending 1 per seat with masks. And again, the Bucks County Department of Health felt that as long as students were wearing masks, 2 students per seat would be sufficient. The American Academy of Pediatrics, again, they were a little more general here, saying minimize the number of students on the bus at one time within reason, and again, are recommending that masks be worn if we can't maintain a 6-foot distance. So on the next slide, again, as we've looked at all this guidance, we've really kind of settled on the American Academy of Pediatrics. That's the primary guidance we've been utilizing as we've gone through this. We feel that it's specific enough that it can give us some direction. The other thing that we feel that it does is, one, it really strongly urges in-person instruction. We know that's very important. And secondly, it balances the physical distancing guidance with the students' social and emotional needs, recognizing again that we need to get our kids back in school so that we can educate them and provide those supports that they really need. So again, with their guidance, we've been using a general guideline of 3 to 6 feet for the students on physical distancing and 6 feet for our staff. And then transportation, We'll social distance to the maximum extent possible, but do that within reason. So what we're looking at right now is having 2 to a seat with masks, very similar to what Bucks County recommended. And in this PowerPoint at the bottom, there is a link to the entire guidance that the AAP has put out. So if you're interested in looking at that, you can find that information on this slide. And next, before I turn it over to Teresa to talk about where we are right now and what school will look like under green, red, and yellow, I just wanted to point out that even though this has been a difficult time for us as a district and as a community and across the country, we do have some opportunities that really have come out of this. As I'm sure you've seen in the news, one of the biggest things that we've been able to do is provide one-to-one technology for our students. So we're using the CARES funding to ensure that every student in the district has a device. And I know that many of you have told me in the past that technology continues to be an issue within the district. So with this, we don't see that being a problem moving forward. Every student will have a device and we'll be able to refresh it on a regular basis. And then the other thing that I think is a real positive, and I've heard from parents since I started here, is the concern over EMTA busing, especially for our elementary students. And with some of the concerns that we've been talking to EMTA about, it really helped us take a really close look at what we're doing on transportation. And we believe right now, based on where we're at, that if we move some of our special ed classes to have more students educated out of their home building, that we'll be able to expand the yellow bus service and provide that to all our elementary students and most of our middle school students at the same cost that we're right now paying EMTA for their service. So again, I think we feel pretty strongly that we're going to be able to pull that off. And again, a big bonus for the district, and I'm sure that'll alleviate a lot of the issues and concerns that our families have had over the years using EMTA. And then lastly, again, this has helped us to think a little bit differently about our educational program. So giving us an opportunity to again expand options for our students and families moving forward, not only during this crisis, but after, with some of the software that we're looking to purchase, as well as the one-to-one initiative. And with that, I'll turn it over to Teresa.
Thanks, Brian. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go over how we are looking to operate in red, yellow, and green phases. I'll provide a broad overview, and then we'll go deeper into the details of facilities, transportation, and technology, and then back into the educational side. So as you can see, looking at the green phase, our plan is to in-school instruction, remote instruction, and utilizing Erie's Public Schools Cyber Academy. Our classroom capacity would be utilized at 100% capacity for all students choosing to attend in person with social distancing to the maximum extent possible. Transportation, EPS will transport all eligible elementary on yellow buses with 2 students to a seat. Middle school students will be transported on a combination of EMTA buses and yellow buses. High school students will utilize the EMTA service. Face coverings will be required of all students riding district buses and EMTA buses. Food service for this phase, breakfast and lunch, will be served in classrooms to limit large gatherings in common areas such as cafeterias. And with all of that being said, we are working in committees with administrators and the EEA to develop procedures to handle all of this, and we will be filtering it down to ILTs very soon. Looking at the yellow phase, instructional options again, in-school instruction, remote instruction, Erie's Public Schools Cyber Academy. Classroom capacity, the district would utilize classrooms and common areas as instruction spaces to accommodate all students while following social distance guidelines. Transportation would be the same as it was in the green phase. Breakfast and lunch will be served in classrooms in order to limit large gatherings in common areas such as cafeterias. In the red phase, all EPS students will receive full-time direct instruction from qualified district teachers via an online learning platform. The district will continue to offer all available supports to students, including access to counseling and other resources as possible under local and state health and safety guidelines. Instruction, all students 12 will utilize a Schoology online learning platform to participate in remote instruction, complete assignments. Traditional Monday through Friday schedule. Food service.
Excuse me, everyone. Could I please ask you to mute your microphone? So we're having trouble hearing Teresa. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Neil Brockman is now going to take you through the technology, transportation, and facilities, and I'll be back on the educational side in a few minutes.
Thanks, Teresa. So as far as technology is concerned, as Brian had indicated earlier on, this crisis has turned into there's a couple of good things that came out of the other side of this. And so we had a technology subcommittee. It was made up of administrators, teachers, IT staff, as well as some central office staff. And we truly do believe that in order for us to be successful academically during this crisis, that we need to make sure that every single student has equitable access to the technology they need to be successful. So as a committee, we got together and the committee decided that based on the developmental skills, as well as what some of those students will be doing in the classroom, that all students from pre-K to first grade would be utilizing an iPad. And then every student from grades 2 through 12 would be issued a Chromebook for them to use for their coursework. There is still some additional work that needs to be done. Obviously, when Teresa gets into what the instructional model is going to look like, we need to ensure that the bandwidth and the infrastructure in our buildings can handle all the traffic that it potentially can have, as well as I know that during our committee work, it was brought up that some of our students who are at the high school level are taking advanced computer classes, and sometimes they might need a device that is a little bit stronger than what is available through a Chromebook. And so we have two possible solutions for that. One would be some kind of a VPN, which would dial into so that the students would be able to have access to their actual desktop, thus giving them capability through the Microsoft Office suite, as well as the potential of issuing a traditional laptop to those students who are taking more advanced computer classes. As far as transportation is concerned, as Mr. Polito stated earlier, this has been an ongoing conversation that we have been having with EMTA as well as internally for about the last, I would say 2 months, to be perfectly honest with you. So as a district, we want to make sure that we are getting as many kids to school as we can. And so based on, the COVID-19 mitigation factors, based on what the American Academy of Pediatrics has stated, we believe that we can get 48 kids on a 72 passenger bus, which would be 2 per seat with face coverings. And that would allow us to bus every single elementary student, every qualifying elementary student to school via some form of yellow bus transportation. It is important to note that as part of this entire thing, we do realize that ensuring the safety and health of our students and our drivers is the top priority. And so we did, as a district, purchase electrostatic sprayers, which when filled with a cleaning solution and disinfecting solution, can actually disinfect an entire bus in as little as 5 minutes. Again, all qualifying middle school students will receive transportation through a combination of EMTA and Yellow Bus. That is one of the things that we are working through with EMTA right now. And the high schools will be serviced solely by EMTA by utilizing some of the tripper runs as well as the fixed routes that EMTA has done for our high school students in the past. As far as the facility is concerned, this has been an ongoing conversation. The team that we have is 3 administrators, 3 teachers, the environmental services manager, our trade supervisor, and myself. We've been working through a number of things that I'll take you through now. The first thing that I want to at least touch base on is how we plan on disinfecting our buildings. All of this will be more outlined in our health and safety plan, which the school board has to approve and we have to submit to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. But essentially, all high-touched areas in any common area is going to be disinfected on a at least 2-hour rotating basis. So light switches, any of the door handles that are in common spaces, railings for stairwells, those kind of things. Each night, every room is going to be not only cleaned the way that we typically have in the past, but as well as disinfected, again, with the use of an electrostatic sprayer, which will atomize the cleaning solution, and it will really be able to get onto those solutions, surfaces, so that we can kill any virus that might be living on there. Each classroom is going to get its own dedicated checklist, which is going to be completed once the room is disinfected, as well as checked by the supervisory staff that are in each building to ensure that the work has been performed. And that also is a good way for us to check, and the teachers to check, and everybody else to check that all of that work has been done as appropriately as it needs to be. Any of those copiers or fax machines or any type of machine that is used by more than one individual, will make sure that there are alcohol-based wipes right next to that machine, so that in between use, it's going to be the expectation of all employees that after you use a copier, you take an alcohol wipe and you wipe down the surfaces that you touched. We are working now on creating subcommittees for some of those shared materials, some of the manipulatives that we may have at the younger grades, to ensure that there is no sharing of materials. We don't want, we want to ensure that everybody is doing what they need to and having access to those educational tools as possible. But we also want to make sure that there is not going to be any transmission of the virus through any shared materials, so that we're not spreading the virus more. And then, as always, as things change, as we get more guidance and more information from the CDC and public health officials, we will make sure that we are updating our maintenance staff with that appropriate training. As Mr. Polito alluded to, face coverings. We will be requiring face coverings of all individuals, students, staff, anyone who enters the building, basically at all times. According to the guidance that we got from the Department of Education and the Department of Health, there are only really 4 instances that they state that a face covering can be removed. And you can see they're listed there below: eating and drinking at least 6 feet apart, seats and desks and assigned work spaces which are at least 6 feet apart, students engaging in any kind of activity for at least 6 feet apart, as well as when a medical condition would prohibit the wearing of the face mask. And again, it is important to note that we are striving for that 6 feet of social distancing. However, we do realize that in certain instances, it's not going to be achieved. And so based on what the medical professionals are telling us, when that cannot be achieved, the face covering will do exactly what we needed to do as far as mitigating factors. Social distancing, as Mr. Polito alluded to, our plan, and as Ms. Zumagala alluded to, in the yellow phase, we are committed to bringing everybody back to school, as well as in the green phase. During yellow, we will be having that 6 feet of social distancing, whereas in the green, it's going to fluctuate somewhere between 3 and 6 feet. It's based on individual room capacity, and I know that each of our individual buildings are actually working on that now, so that every building and every room in every building will actually have the appropriate capacity at 6 feet of social distancing, as well as how many you can fit in there, how many desks and students you can fit in, while decreasing it below that 6 feet. The plan for next school year is to have a temperature check of everybody who arrives to a school building. What we have learned from the CDC is that anybody who is showing symptoms, if they have a fever of over 100.4, that seems to be an indicator that they have a temperature, and it could be one of the signs of COVID-19. And so any individual who does have that temperature over 100.4 will have to not be allowed into school that day. And we're working through the process of what that looks like as far as notifying parents and having them isolated until they can return home. And then the other thing is that we will make sure that we are working together with both the parents and guardians of our students so that they understand what the signs and symptoms of COVID-19 are. That way a parent can recognize that from a student before they go to school. And if they need to stay at home because of that, then they can stay at home. As unfortunately, we do have to plan for the worst. So if this is to happen when we have a student or staff test positive for COVID-19, we will be working very closely with the Department of Health on how we need to assist them with contact tracing as well as building sanitizing. It will be up to the county health officials who remains in self-isolation or in quarantine that is not going to be coming directly from the school district. We are not the governing body that would make that judgment call. That would come directly from the county health officials.
So moving back to instruction, looking at the stakeholders who we desire feedback from for our plan: students, parents, guardians, teachers and administrators, central office and board members, and community members. This is a goal statement that we worked on with a reopening committee, and I think it pretty much sums up the direction that we're heading. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented solutions. In a collaborative effort to ensure student success, we will develop a strong framework allowing all children to maintain their educational momentum. Through high quality teaching and supplemental learning opportunities, Erie's public schools will continue to partner with families to provide their children with the best possible education. And I think that connects with exactly what Brian said, opportunity out of crisis. So as educators, it gives us a chance to rethink the way we do things and change our mindsets moving forward. One of the things we wanted to do for this return to school plan is to provide parent and student choice. As Brian presented the survey results earlier, we felt that our families wanted some options. So this is what we're looking at right now. We're looking at a traditional option, and this pathway will enable students to physically attend school Monday through Friday. In the green phase, students and staff will socially distance to the maximum extent possible, 3 feet per student with face coverings, 6 feet of social distancing for adults. In the yellow phase, students and staff will socially distance 6 feet. Students will receive in-person instruction based on a rotation. Students rotating in overflow rooms will connect to the classroom remotely with support and supervision from additional teachers and staff. And with that being said, this kind of gives you a visual of what our classrooms look like with 3 feet of social distancing and then 6 feet of social distancing. So that's one of the challenges we've had to work with as we've been going through this to find additional spaces where we can deliver education. Another pathway option that families have is remote learning from home. Students will learn from home full time. They will follow the assigned schedule and stream into their classes in real time. We also have a blended hybrid. It's a combination of the traditional model and remote learning from home. The emphasis will be on the customization to address each student's or family's needs, concerns, or priorities. Flexible scheduling will allow face-to-face instruction on certain days, while other days are online in real time. Attendance intention must be determined by quarter. So we would ask families to commit to this model for a certain amount of time. Finally, we have the pathway that would be EPS Full Cyber Academy. It's the asynchronous online instruction from home based from the Patrick J. DiPaolo Center at Emerson Gridley campus. Face-to-face instruction occurs as needed and appropriate. This model would be appropriate for students who are not able to follow a traditional school day schedule. We will be following up after we receive feedback and move forward with this. We'll be following up with a survey to families for them to choose a pathway option before we get started with the school year, so we can try to get things organized as much as possible. We did choose a learning management system. We had a committee that chose that system moving forward. So Nora Dolak will be taking over to explain our work with Schoology.
Morning. I'm going to share a few slides to introduce our new learning management system, or LMS. A committee of stakeholders worked during June to adopt an LMS to provide a platform to maximize our learning options. This allows us to scale across the district from K to 12 using a consistent digital platform. The LMS works to integrate our student information system, Infinite Campus, with all other digital tools teachers and students use in one location. It integrates with IC to allow for your enrollments, attendance, grades, and everything to be entered in one place and pass through to IC. 3 top-rated vendors presented to the committee: Canvas, Schools PLP, and Schoology was selected by majority vote. Some of the assets noted by the committee are included on this slide. It has dynamic options for feedback to students, video clip feedback. You can write on the student work digitally. It increases student engagement, provides data and analytics, a platform for open, collaborative teaching and learning environments, many options for differentiation, and many languages available to support EL learners. And customized support is available to our teachers during implementation. And that was very important to the group because this will be a learning curve for us. Schoology supports our strategic plan. Teachers will utilize Schoology to deliver instructional materials and technology resources that are flexible. And you can see with all of these bullets and this graphic that we're familiar with showing our pillars that Schoology supports every facet and every pillar of our strategic plan. I won't read those to you, but they're available. I'll turn it over to Karen Ryan to discuss unfinished instruction.
Good morning, everyone. In June, the Council for Great City Schools released guidance for addressing unfinished instruction after COVID-19 school closures. The purpose of the guidance was to provide district teams with an instructional framework for addressing unfinished instruction and learning losses. The framework is based on 6 overarching principles for supporting students with unfinished instruction. In planning instruction for the upcoming school years, districts should 1, stick to grade level content and instructional rigor, and 2, focus on depth of instruction rather than pace. To provide this grade level instruction, districts will need to help teachers prioritize content and learning. And in order to continue to reflect our district's instructional vision and commitment to equity, educators will also need to maintain inclusion of each and every learner and identify and address gaps in learning through instruction, avoiding the misuse of standardized testing to place kids in high or low ability groups, or to provide low levels of rigor to lower performing students. Finally, we must consider focusing on commonalities that students share in this time of crisis, not just their differences. So we are going to continue to work in the months of July and August to gather teams of teachers and stakeholders in order to really hone in on how district-wide we're going to address our unfinished instruction for the upcoming school year.
Morning, everyone. I'm going to talk to the Angie Kanaki anybody out there doesn't know who I am, I'm going to discuss special education and ELL, as well as our behavioral health supports. We've been having ongoing discussions with various groups, including our special ed supervisors, our EL supervisor, our clinical mental health team leader, and our nurses, as well as having ongoing input from our parents, teachers, our students, some of them, directly, and some of them just through their parents, and then our community agencies around these issues. Although we recognize that we'd like to have in-person instruction as much as possible, we recognize that we're going to have to be flexible about our instruction. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So again, as I said, we'd like to see our students in school as much as possible, but we recognize we're going to have flexible service provision based on student needs and what our parents choose, as far as whether or not they want their kids in school full time, whether or not they want the hybrid model, whether they want to be at home full time, or if we have changes in our phases between green, yellow, and red. So we envision that students will receive services on the days that they attend school in person, and they can also receive services remotely on other days via online instruction, phone and email consultation, as they had during the previous shutdown. Teletherapy is another option, as well as various online applications that our parents and students and teachers are comfortable using. We'll have translation and case management support services provided via our various community agencies and our student support liaisons to assist our EL students and families. We do want our specialized programs, especially, to return to school full-time, but we do recognize that we do have medically fragile students whose parents may not be comfortable with them returning to the school setting, so we will be prepared to deliver services to them virtually. We'd like to look at the option of having in-home instruction for some of our homebound students. We're going to have to see how that goes, as far as whether or not parents are comfortable with that and whether or not we can maintain the CDC guidelines. We also are looking at compensatory services. Recent guidance just came out from PDE around whether how we can determine whether students lost ground and how much ground they lost during the shutdown. So we'll be looking at student progress at the fourth quarter versus at the end of the first marking period in 2021 to make decisions regarding compensatory services. So some of our issues and challenges, I think, as a lot of us recognize, are going to be how are we going to be able to implement some of those CDC recommendations around maskings and social distancing with some of our students. It's going to be difficult. So that's a challenge that we're going to have to work on. We also have issues with hands-on instructional support. Some of our students need very close contact with their teachers, so that's going to be an issue for us, as well as our crisis response procedures and restraints when deemed necessary. Obviously we're not going to be able to maintain social distancing during those times, so that's another issue that we're going to have to work out. We also have to make decisions regarding our community service providers who frequently are in our classrooms. We're going to have to make decisions regarding which of those staff should be able to come in our classrooms and interact directly with our students and staff, and which of them maybe can just be in the building for meetings but don't necessarily need to be in our classrooms. So, our behavioral and mental health support staff did an excellent job over the shutdown, maintaining interaction with the students, not only the students that they worked with during the year, but also students who experienced difficulties just due to the situation that they were experiencing during the shutdown. So our school counselors have been and will continue to provide individual counseling or group counseling. They'll facilitate student assistance team referrals and collaborate with our community agencies to coordinate services. They'll provide support for classroom lessons on school expectations and structure to help students readjust to their full schedule, and facilitate classroom guidance on social distance practices in the school and community and home, and assisting teachers with any behavioral concerns and counseling students to determine the root causes of those issues. They also did and will continue, if necessary, to help parents, if we have to go back to, in-home instruction, or for those students who are having hybrid instruction, to assist parents with any issues that could arise during those times. And our school psychologists and mental health specialists will consult with teachers and administration on school-wide and behavioral and mental health needs of students, and also consult with teachers the counselors, parents, and administrators, and community providers to deliver services to those students who are displaying outward signs of trauma, and refer these students to outside agencies as necessary, as well as providing age-appropriate information, counseling, and support to students related to any anxiety, fears, and loss associated with the current situation or any other situations that might arise. So again, I think they did a great job during the shutdown, and they'll continue to do so in any situation that we have to face. And I'm going to turn it over now to Ken Nixon to talk about more of our student supports.
Thank you, Angie. And just want to say hello, everybody, and thank you for participating and being a part of this today. One of the impacts of COVID-19, as all of us know, it's hit us harder than we've expected, also beyond our imagination, and it continues to do so with issues and concerns around it. So one of the aspects of education that has shifted from being more of coming into receiving information gathering from our families, or it's more about checking in on families and checking in on our students to see about their mental health and well-being. So these two questions stand out overall is, how are you? So how are you doing right now? Mentally, physically, socially, emotionally, and then the other big one would be, what else do you need? So what do you need? What can we do as a school district to help partner with you and support you? One of the document below is actually a hyperlink, but it's from our pbs.org, and I would encourage you to check it if any parents or families are looking for some supports. It does a great job of giving you some structure that you can utilize at home. In terms of student supports, what you have listed in front of you is a long list, but these are all of our programs or initiatives or partnerships that took place last year to support our students. As you look down the list, we have some that stood out tremendously that did some work. Our Blue Coats did a great job with helping support us when we moved into the COVID situation after March 13th. Once we saw that students were having to do everything from home and parents needed some extra support with keeping students engaged and on task, our Blue Coats took it upon themselves to partner with our building principals and administrators and to go out and knock on doors and help support our students and families. Another huge organization that helps us is through United Way, our community schools directors. Again, this is another group of folks that are within our buildings, at least 10 of our buildings, that are vastly doing work to build relationships with our families and make connections within our communities. And again, that's a lot of the work that we're shifting to, right? So it's not that we know that students and people aren't coming into our buildings at this time. We're getting ready to again, but through the time being, it's all about reaching out and supporting people to the best of our ability from a virtual or in-case basis. So some of the other aspects that we're really focused on in terms of supporting when we talk about the mental health, the social, emotional, academic, and behavioral aspect. As you see from the list, we have our peer mentoring program. Peer mentoring is a student-by-student support model. So we have our older students helping support some of our younger students to encourage them and to help and interact. Our peer mediation is our behavior specialists from Northwest Pennsylvania Family Services. They have helped tremendously with doing a student-by-student conflict resolution model. That will be something that will be back in place to help with supporting that social emotional aspect. And restorative practice approaches. So this is intermittent at certain buildings, but we do have restorative practices being implemented, focusing on circles, which is taking the time to sit down and circle up with one another to discuss and talk about issues and really get to the crux of what it is that is causing the problem, and then always looking for amend and a repair from that. The other aspect we have is responsive classroom approaches. So morning meetings is something that's shown tremendous benefit for our students, especially in our elementary and some of our middle schools. Again, that is something that can take place in person and also virtually. So that is a huge aspect that teachers take advantage of to just talk with their students in the morning. It helps just to kind of get a gist of where the students are at, where their heads are at, where they're at socially, emotionally, and how and teachers can put supports right in place immediately to help students for the day. Our school-wide positive behavior intervention and supports, which is also known as SWIBIS. that is intentionally focused on positive interaction with students, staff, and families to make our schools safe overall and welcoming. Our student assistance program, which was mentioned earlier, is another huge benefit that we have, to have mental health counselors on staff to support our students from the academically, behaviorally, mentally, and also to help with suicide prevention. Our trauma-informed care and trauma-sensitive schools is focused on resiliency. So it's focused on the strength and what we can pull out of students and what we can capture from students to help them from a trauma perspective. Some of those aspects that you might have heard of or seen from your students or from teachers are cool zones, think sheets, and calm corners. Those are some of the pieces that we use that we will look to utilize again. Our second step is a social emotional learning curriculum where it focuses on 22 skills that are really strongly around emotional development and social interaction. Those again can be done in person or also virtually. So I just wanted to highlight some of those key initiatives, programs, and organizations that are with us that are supporting our students from a social, emotional learning perspective, but also engaging with our parents as well. So before reopening, with the impact of COVID hitting in March, our staff was asked to go through our Safe Schools online site, which they did go over some training and diversity. They looked at our equity and inclusion toolkit that is put out by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. They did a deep dive into some student mental health and also youth suicide awareness, prevention, and postvention, which was just helping to support and give us some more knowledge and experience to be able to deal with students. Because looking at it from it's a total different perspective from when students are in front of you and you're engaging and you can see if a student's going through something to now where you're connecting with them virtually and being able to make sure students are still feeling safe and protected and mentally well. The other aspect that we did was we reviewed and looked at all of our SWIBIS matrices, our lessons, acknowledgements, and completed our fidelity tools to make sure that we're at a high level with implementation. Upon reopening, our schools will look to move into SWIBIS rollouts for staffs and students, along with reteaching behavioral expectations. This can be done in person and virtually. Definitely classroom routines and focus on classroom management and how we're going to do that from a virtual perspective is something that falls under this, as well as acknowledge and praise our students, and that's in person and virtually. So the key, again, with reopening is to really monitor and support our students from an academic, behavioral, emotional, and social perspective, really focus in on encouraging and promoting their mental health and well-being. So thank you, everyone. I believe Teresa's going to lead us through the breakout groups.
Okay, so next we're going to get into our breakout groups. We're a little bit over, so we're going to shorten our break to 10 minutes. Before we split up for the break, I just want to point out that the purpose of the breakout groups is really to get your feedback. We need that feedback. We think we've put together a plan that reflects the needs of our community, but we want your feedback on that so that we can take that and adjust and finalize our plans and get that out to our families. So just some norms for the breakout rooms. Initially we're going to have 3 groups because of the number of people that are signed up today. We have 6 groups, 2 groups that will be working in the instructional group, 2 in the facilities and transportation, and 2 in student support services. During the break, you will be assigned to your group and you will not move. The facilitators will move every half hour. So by the end of the next hour and a half, you'll have an opportunity to provide feedback on all 3 of those areas. Just as a reminder, when we get into the breakout groups, to please keep your microphones muted unless you're speaking. And we would like to use the raise your hand feature, and we'll try to call on people as they raise their hands to the best of our abilities. Again, we'd like to try to get as many voices heard in these breakout groups as possible. So I ask that you try to limit your comments to about 2 minutes. The other thing that we do have is the chat. So we are not going to be monitoring that during the breakout groups, but we encourage you to leave your questions, comments, or feedback there. We will print that out and start an FAQ that will circulate with everybody that's participated so that we're at least able to respond to those questions after today is wrapped up. And with that, then we'll take our 10-minute break and get back into our groups. And before we do that, one other thing, we're not going to come back together after that. So again, I'd just like to thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule today to do this and provide us some feedback. Thank you.